Have you ever wondered what your nephew, who's always talking about games and keeps mentioning wanting to be a game designer, is going on about? Well, this is the video for you. Welcome back to Other Pixel Games. Today we're expanding the OPG concepts video structure with a longer video explaining, for the people who maybe only have a passing interest or understanding of the games industry, what game design is and what game designers actually do. I'll give you a breakdown of the different types of game designer that I know and a bit of an overview of what you might do as a game designer. So without any more explanation, let's get right into it. Before all that though, here's a quick update. As we move forward, I'm finding that a lot of the code work I'm doing isn't great to watch. It's a lot of bug fixing, cleaning things up, and just generally making things more organised. So instead of making a video about my coding journey just for the sake of making a video about my coding journey because I said I was going to make a video about my coding journey, I'm going to change it from a fortnightly diary style thing to something more akin to, if I do something cool or interesting, I'll make a video and talk about it. I'm still planning to have weekly videos alternating between shorts and longs, but this will free me up to make other types of videos that I want to make. Like this one for instance. So now, back to the video. Game design is a discipline of game development with two parts. The first part is concerned with a combination of experience, research, data and instinct to come up with games and features that are built by other departments. For example, writing game design documents explaining how a feature should work for a member of the code team to build it in the game. The second part is about practical implementation, balancing and development of gameplay related features. For example, taking the work that the code team has done and finessing the numbers until it's a fun game, or building out the geometry of the levels that the players will be exploring. Game design covers a wide range of elements that can be broken down into 5 or 6 categories or specializations. Conveniently, they can be broken down into different job roles as well, so let's discuss what each game design job role actually is and what it means. I will note very quickly before I move into my descriptions, there is no centralized descriptor of any of this. As you'll see when we get to technical designer, many places describe things very differently, or expect different things, so what I'm putting out there is sort of a generalization of what I believe is the widest agreed explanation, so if you apply for something, make sure to look at the job description to make sure it lines up with your expectations. A gameplay designer is, as it sounds, a designer focused on the moment-to-moment gameplay. Gameplay designers will work on characters, they'll work on how puzzles work, game mechanics, objects, the rules governing the world, game modes, vehicles. They'll work on anything to do with the actual game interactions. Usually not including the levels, but well, the games industry is an interesting place where you're often asked to wear a lot of hats, and unfortunately it's not dress-up time, but a request for you to do extra jobs. Gameplay designers often work in 2 stages, at the beginning of a cycle and at the end. They'll design on paper what they want, then once that part is implemented by the code team, they'll take what they're given and mould it into something playable and fun. There'll often be a lot of back and forth with the coders inching closer and closer to what's fun, so it can be beneficial for a gameplay designer to have a little knowledge of code to understand the limitations. AI designers in particular will do a lot more work with implementation, and will often work with some kind of visual scripting system that lets them create engaging enemy interactions without having to send the whole thing back to code every time they want to make a change. Some subcategories of gameplay design include combat design, which focuses on how the player fights, AI design, which looks at game enemies or NPCs of the game, 3Cs designers work on the moment-to-moment gameplay of using the player character, a vehicle handling designer is exactly what it sounds like. Sometimes quest designer might come under this, but I've just as often seen it under narrative, as it's a combination of what the player has to do in the mission, gameplay, and why they're doing it, narrative. When most people talk about game designers, they're usually talking about gameplay designers. A level designer is someone who blocks out the levels for a game, or someone who builds a section of a game world if the game is more open. Sometimes this is done by putting together pre-made tiles, other times it's done from scratch using collision and blocks which will later be made to look good by an art team. In my experience, level designers are the most hands-on designers, working almost entirely in engine, with some preferring to block out a level on paper before working on the game itself. That said, I've recently heard of some companies whose level designers give maps and design documents to another team to put the levels together and don't put them together themselves, which is wild to me. The difference between good level design and bad level design is huge. The things that a good level designer thinks of when building something are wide and varied. From landmarks to help the player understand where they are without checking a map in a single player game, to multiplayer maps that intentionally funnel players into interesting scenarios. I've built many levels in my day, but I'm always learning more, and the things I see built by people who title themselves as level designer blow me away. Level design doesn't have a lot of subcategories that I've seen. There's world designer, which focuses on open world design work. There's track designers for racing games. You could maybe put puzzle designers for things like match 3 games in the subset of level design, but I think that that's more like a gameplay designer. Systems designers work on the parts of the game that are less integral to moment-to-moment gameplay, but more important to a long-term experience. Think level up systems, shop and currency, and sometimes a game's onboarding. Counter to level designers, I find that system designers could be the most out-of-engine designers in the spectrum, alongside narrative, though in my experience most system designers do work in engine as much as the other designers. Their work, much more than game design, can be calculated and analysed on a spreadsheet or a database, and so technically you could do all of your work in that and upload it through a JSON file, or if you have no respect for a coder's time, by sending them the changes and walking away. Most systems designers don't do this. Most people, like myself, will get the system made by the code team and then spend time themselves hooking up the plans. It's quicker, it ensures that you know where everything goes in case there's a change you want to make after testing, and it keeps everything moving if you can pick up those pieces of work, instead of expecting someone else to do it. Systems design has a lot of subcategories. Economy designers build up the economy, everything from how you get money and how many types of currency there are to how you spend it, and how it gets in and out of your bank. Metagame designers work on things like progression, things like leveling systems or skill unlocks. It could also be things like card packs and merging systems. They ensure that the player's experience outside of the gameplay is rewarding and that the game loops all work together. A monetization designer builds out all the ways that a free-to-play game or a game like EA Sports FC earns money beyond the initial purchase. Think in-app purchases, gacha boxes, gem purchases, all of those extras, how much they cost, how much you get for each purchase, all of that. Finally, live ops designers might come more under production, but they're the people who design live events in games. You know those timed exclusive events that give you a reward for being the best at something, or tournaments against other players, whether synchronous or asynchronous? That's all live ops. A narrative designer is not just a writer. If you're working in design and you're just using a narrative designer as a writer, you're underutilizing them. While a narrative designer can be one of the people writing the script and the world for the game, they will also work on getting that into the game. They'll work with other teams to help ensure that the overall tone of the game reflects the writing and vision. A good narrative designer works directly with the rest of the game design team to figure out how story and gameplay can marry to give the very best narrative. It's not just the words on the page, it's also working with the level design team to help them to tell the story and the way the world is laid out. It's working with the art team to figure out how the world is constructed and why that one door is always blocked. Narrative designers are the reason that the game's story feels connected to its gameplay, why you believe in the game world when things happen. There aren't a lot of subcategories of narrative designer. You could argue that writers who just do the writing of dialogue and world building, and also quest designers who both write dialogue and come up with the missions for the player to take part in are, but beyond that I can't think of any. Technical designers are... Okay, I'm going to be real with you here. I don't know what a technical designer is. Not because I've never worked with one, not because I've never looked into it, but because every single place I've seen a technical designer role, it's been totally different. Not just a little different, but a different job. In one place, a technical designer was the person who input the numbers and balance to a system that another designer had built, which honestly I just thought was a system designer. At another place, it was a person who built tools for designers to use. At another, it was a person who knew how to code so they could do some of the implementation themselves. All I can really say about technical designers is when you apply for a job, really look at the job spec in case it's totally different from what you expected. All these others, you can generally know what you're in for by applying for the role, but technical design, good luck. UI designer or user interface designers are a bit more art focused than design, so we'll talk about them in a future video about art disciplines, but they do design work as well, so it would be unjust to suggest that they are only art. UX designers, however, are... well, they're a little bit of an odd one out in this list. They are a design discipline, I think, but they're relatively new and still trying to settle into a place, so I won't go into quite as deep a rabbit hole as the others. But for a quick overview, I will say that a UX designer's job is to ensure that the game's overall experience is a good one. The reason I've linked them up with UI designers is because a lot of UX work focuses on UI, trying to enhance the button placements in the game's HUD, figuring out how to improve accessibility, and generally making the games more user-friendly. This can include the tutorials, the menus, the gameplay itself. They touch a lot of the game and work with the other team members to improve what they've built. Finally, a generalist designer, or just game designer, as most people call it, is a designer who is expected to be able to do it all. Most designers I know these days are more generalist, but with a leaning towards one specialization or another. In my experience, the smaller the company, the more generalists you have. The bigger the company, the more people specialize. For example, at Future Games of London, when I was there, for the most part we only had generalists, but in Roll 7 we had a mix of level designers and systems designers. Generalists can slip into whatever role they're needed in, but they rarely excel in all those roles in the same way a specialist would. It's the jack of all trades, master of none situation, but in some cases like these, someone who can do a bit of everything is incredibly useful, and many designers use their time as a generalist to find the part of the discipline that they enjoy most and start to specialise. So what am I? Where do I fit in all of this? Well, I consider myself a generalist designer, as you might have guessed, but I lean more towards systems design after years working on games that already have the gameplay locked down upon my arrival. That isn't to say that I haven't done or can't do any of the others. I do consider myself a generalist after all. It's just that I lean more towards systems. As for seniority, I think I could work as a senior or a lead level, but probably not principal. Thanks to my time working in a wide variety of roles, I haven't really locked in and specialised enough to put myself in a box of principal in one of these areas. So that was a general overview of the game design discipline. What do you want to know about next? Art, code, QA, production, something else entirely? Thanks for watching. If you're enjoying my content, please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.